Hello and welcome to the Next Gen podcast. It is Pastor Blake, and joining me today, as always, Pastor Philip Hahn.
Hello, this is Pastor Philip Hahn.
That is Pastor Philip Hahn. He is our Waukesha kids pastor, puppet extraordinaire, guitar playing, leader building, kids pastor.
Which has nothing to do with this kid's podcast.
Nothing for today, but he has some stuff to share. You've worked hard on our pathways and making them into kid versions of our pathways. And can you just explain what our pathways are? You don't have to name them all or anything. This isn't a pop quiz, but what are they?
One of the things that Bridge Church tries to convey is that there are at least 7, of course there's more spiritual disciplines that we should pursue, but there's at least 7 areas in which every Christian should be growing in their life. And there's 360 faith, self-denial, mission-minded, Bible engagement, daily prayer. So with all of these different pathway practices, the idea is not that you have to be continually growing in all 7 areas.
Right.
The idea is you're working on one at any given time.
Right.
And when you feel like you've made progress in that area, maybe you go to the next one and work on that one for a while. It's like wherever you feel like you're lacking the most to pursue Christ, those are the areas you should focus on during that season of your life.
Yeah.
And there are 7 that we focus on. Of course, there are more spiritual disciplines that you can focus on, but These are the 7 that Bridge Church finds the most valuable.
And you can find all of them on our website if you go to bridgechurch.net. There'll be a little drop-down menu that you can find our pathways. Just a great resource on asking yourself the question, am I being a disciple of Jesus? And if not, here's some different things to kind of check in and see how you're doing in those ways. Not as a scoreboard or to just check something off a list, but because we really do want to keep growing with Christ.
Yeah, when you appreciate the forgiveness and free grace and acceptance and love that God pours out on us so unconditionally, that you just kind of really want to pursue Christ more. And these are 7 ways that you can achieve that, just tools to make it a little clearer how to get a step closer to Jesus every day.
Right, with different resources and even some other messages or a podcast even. So a lot of tools for you in that tool belt that you can go check out. I would encourage you to, as we approach, we're in the new year. This is the January podcast, so hopefully people have some resolutions.
Yeah.
Or not.
I don't really care. But I will say that every January, Bridge Church is in the practice of focusing on self-denial for the new year.
One
to
of our
set
pathways.
the stage for what's going to happen in the new year. It's not a resolution. It's just to make sure that you start out the year in a sense that you are pursuing Christ above the other things that could be pursuits for this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what we're here to talk about today. As one of your pathways you have in front of you is the self-denial Bridge Kids pathway. And we just want to talk about how do we get our kids to fast? How do we get our kids to practice self-denial? And not in those terms, but how do we model this for them? How do we make it something that they see the value in? It's not just a scare tactic that we try to do, but something that shows them how beneficial self-denial is for their spiritual development and spiritual life.
Yeah, I would say that self-denial is in the same category as any area of spiritual growth you want for your kids. In several senses, you first of all have to demonstrate it for them.
Yep.
That this is a value to me, to our family, that this is something worth doing for me as the parent. And then second, to make sure that it's an internal motivation for pursuing Christ,
Right.
Not a list of things you should do. Because when you get into the checklist mentality of, oh, you should do this, let me tell you, you have to do it, that there's no reason to do anything because it's a checklist.
Right.
You have to say, this is my way to get more Jesus. And when you want more Jesus, after all he's given you, there's the more you get from Jesus, the better life is, the better his blessings are. And it's not the more favor you get, it's not the more love you get, not the more acceptance you get, because you have that all unconditional.
Yeah.
And so whatever your motivation for you, you have to make sure that the motivation you communicate to your kids is, hey, list what Jesus has done for you today. List what Jesus has done for you this year.
Yeah.
Doesn't that just make you want more Jesus?
Yeah.
Well, here's one way to get that more Jesus.
It's an appreciation of what he's done for us, and then also a laying down of certain things that we hold dear, saying, God, we want to make more time for you because that's how worthy you are. And the truth is, your kids are going to grow up. They're going to go out of your house, and they're going to have to maybe have their own family and model this for them. And so it's not just about, like you said, Pastor Phil, checking off those things and making sure that they're being good Christians at home, but how are you developing them to be good Christians on their own? And so that's what I'm excited to talk about today, just real briefly.
Yeah. I think the term good Christians is one of the worst things you can encourage a kid to be.
Yes, I know.
Don't you ever be
joke.
a good Christian. Because the idea is, hey, some of this has to do with me. No. It's all about Jesus and what he did for us. And so that language is sometimes important. But as far as self-denial goes, specifically, since that's kind of the podcast title here,
Yes.
and the motivation for this year, we've got a kid's version of every pathway practice, including self-denial, on the website, bridgechurch.net /kids. You can get that resource, but if you want a very simple summary of it, you can look at them as adults too. Sure, fine, go ahead.
No one will judge you for it.
No one will judge you for going to the kids page because it's just a little simpler, a little easier to understand. I write it for kindergartners. But yeah, that pathway is basically summarizes for a kid what self-denial is and how to go about pursuing it. So once you realize that it's for Jesus, not to gain some kind of favor, self-denial is telling your body no so your spirit can grow.
Yep.
It helps you see Jesus is really what you need most, and it's more important than the things you're giving up. So it's not just about saying, I'm going to give up video games. I'm going to give up sugar. I'm going to give up screens. It's where and when in your house are you going to read your Bible and pray more? What prayer need are you specifically pursuing from God this year? What answer do you need? What decision are you going to make? What person in your life do you want to witness to and get saved and get to church? What are you pursuing from God? And let fasting be the way that you tell your body, I want the answer to this prayer more than screens, more than food, more than sugar. I'm going to give that up just to prove to my body this is more important. What I'm seeking from God is so important that I will give up something else that's really hard just to pursue it harder.
Yeah. And I kind of want to get into what should we be encouraging our kids, our students with as we talk about fasting, because I think there's a lot of different ways you can fast. Biblically, it's giving up food, and sometimes giving up food and water if you're doing an absolute fast, of course, being safe and responsible with those things. And what should we be challenging our kids? I do think there's an importance to not putting low expectations on our students, whereas we're going to talk about fasting at youth group in January and really asking them to give up something that is going to tell themselves no, that is going to be difficult, not just, hey, don't look at your phones for an hour,
Yeah.
But really, let's feel this a little bit. That way we increase that reliance upon God, that we make sure we're getting that time and saying, I'm telling myself no, specifically to focus on you, God, that this should cost us something. So you deal a lot with younger kids. Can you kind of give us an example or maybe give us just some insight or wisdom to not selling kids short?
Well, the easiest way to put it is how much can you give up, not how little can you give up.
Yeah.
I mean, you as a parent this year, I would challenge you, try to fast the way the Bible demonstrates fasting, if for no other reason than to realize how difficult self-denial is supposed to be. So if you're medically fit to do so, which fasting is actually a pretty healthy habit physically, when you do it right. But if you're physically able, I challenge parents, please try to actually go without any food for at least 3 days. Some of you who have done this before, if you've done 3 days before, try fasting for a whole week or 2 weeks or the entire 3-week time with no physical food.
Right.
And that's how hard it should be for our kids.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should have our kids deny food, because with their growing bodies, it might not be healthy for them to do this.
Sure.
But the level of difficulty it is for you to not eat for a solid week or two is the level of difficulty you should challenge your kids to. Like, hey, I know you just got all these brand new video games and devices and downloads for Christmas. How about you put them away for an entire week and not play with your new toys?
Yeah.
How hard would that be? That's hard. And it's supposed to be hard because you're telling your body, what I want from God, the more I want from Jesus, is so important to my life right now that I want my body to feel the pain of giving up the stuff I don't need.
Right. Yeah, that's good. How would you navigate that as a kid or student might see taking something like video games away as a punishment, because maybe that's what's been used as punishment before. So how do you work on associating, no, fasting is a discipline that actually is beneficial for us, as opposed to this looks like what happens when I get in trouble?
It really has to be an internal motivation. You can't tell somebody to spiritual discipline. You have to motivate them to want more Jesus.
Okay.
And so when the focus is, how much more do you want from Jesus? How bad do you want the answer to this prayer? That's the focus.
Yeah.
Like, if you want an answer to this prayer, if you want your friend to get saved, if you want more of Jesus, if you want to feel God's presence, if you want to hear his voice, how much can you give up to tell your body that that's more important?
Yeah.
And so it's not about what you're giving up or telling your kid you've got to give this up, because really it's counterproductive to tell your kids what they need to give up. To tell your kids this is what you need to deny yourself. It's really helping them to see the more you want to pursue from Jesus is the focus. And if giving up video games for 3 weeks is the trigger in their brain to remind them that they're pursuing Jesus that hard, then that's what they can do. You can give them lists of things and say, hey, I'm not asking you to tell me what you're willing to give up. I'm asking you how bad you want more Jesus.
Yeah.
Do you want it bad enough to give up dessert for one day? Or do you want it bad enough to give up dessert for the entire month of January?
Yeah. And it might be something that they have to grow into then, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess as a parent, you have to be willing to accept that they might say, oh, one day's good. I'll just take the one day.
Yeah.
And be praying and modeling the other fasts for them.
I have asked my own kids, how much more of Jesus do you want? Would you participate in self-denial this year to pursue it? And there have been years when my kids have said, I really don't want to do it this year.
Yeah.
And that's not a salvation issue. If they don't want to do it this year, I'm not going to push it and make them. But I will close that conversation with, well, when you're ready for more of Jesus on that level, you can self-denial. And it doesn't have to be in January.
Yeah.
You can do this when you're ready for more Jesus, or when you have a prayer request that you need to pursue, when you have a decision that you need to make. This is a solution for you at that time.
Right.
And there have also been years when I'm going to give up screens for a week.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, that's your pursuit of Jesus. Now you know what you're giving up. Where in the house are you going to be when you read your Bible and pray a little extra for that? Right. And what time of day is it going to be, so that I can remind you so you don't forget? Because fasting without prayer is just a bad diet.
Yep.
You know, it does no spiritual good.
Yeah.
Fasting with prayer is the point. So it's not less of the world, it's more of Jesus.
Right. Yeah, we're going to wrap up here soon. Fasting must center on God. It is the reason we do it. Like you said, if it's not, if the things we're taking away aren't replaced by him, it's just pointless. Whether it's we're just meditating more, we're freeing up our schedule, or we're not straining our eyes, we're not looking at that blue light from screens as much. No, it's about God. It's a focus on him. And fasting reminds us that God is our provider of every good and perfect gift, and that when we take that time to focus on him, it's drawing us deeper into that relationship, deeper into the things that he has for us, that you've already talked about, his grace and his mercy and his goodness. And it just helps us to focus on him. And that's why we do it at the beginning of the year. It's a great start to our year. Not that there's anything magical about doing it in January. And we do encourage you to make it a part of your routine. I think something that could be beneficial for families specifically is doing devotions at nighttime. If you're giving up screen time and we're not going to watch TV for 3 weeks, then at night, do a devotional together as a family, modeling that behavior for them.
Yeah, in the spirit of more, it's like less is more. So the focus is not on what are we giving up. If I'm going to do a Daniel fast, it's not about spending extra time looking
Right.
up recipes for veggie diets.
Right.
It's choosing less to gain more. It is more. You're not giving up, you're gaining. So the whole point of fasting, the whole point of self-denial is to gain. It's more. It's more Jesus, more answer, more prayer, more good. So it's not about the less, it's about the more.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and as we close today, just a reminder, if you do not post your fast on social media, it doesn't actually count as a fast. You have to, if you don't tell people how much you're hurting because of your fasting, then it's not as spiritual.
Yes, of course, because everybody needs to know how extra spiritual you are
Right.
so they can praise you for your efforts.
Well, it's part of the credit, that's why we do it here, people.
Yes.
No, don't post your fast. We don't have to know you fasted.
Yeah, Jesus said, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. It's not about the credit or how sorry you can get people to feel for you. It's like, oh, I haven't eaten in 4 days. Well, you know what? Just keep it to yourself. It's about your pursuit of Christ, not how much people feel sorry for you that you haven't eaten.
Ooh, that's good. And you can model that for your kids as well.
Yeah, don't even tell them you aren't eating. Well, you do want your kids to know
can
you're
explain
fasting
it.
so
You
that
can
they
explain
can
it.
so that they can see you model it.
Just don't complain about it. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a great start to your January. Thank you for checking out the Next Gen podcast. Have a great week.